everyone, and welcome to today's live webinar. My name is Taylor Hempel, and I'm a marketing specialist here at ESC Spectrum. We're excited for you to join us during our session, Monitoring Plan Updates and Changes, Where to Start. Today, we have our very own lead regulatory and reporting engineer, JessLee Sanchez, who will cover best practices to update or change your facility's monitoring plan. As we go through the webinar, we encourage you to place any questions you might have in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. At the end of the session, JessLee will answer to the best of his ability. With that being said, let's begin.
Thank you, Taylor. I appreciate that. I just want to make sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you for joining us on this presentation on monitoring plan updates and changes. My name is JessLee Sanchez, and I will be running through this in a manner that's simple and where to start when you're doing a monitoring update. Now, one of the things is that monitoring updates don't really happen too often, depending on changes or first-time implementation of a system. So it's not too often that it's repetitive. And again, we just wanted to throw in a few tips that might help you along the process in implementing or updating your new monitoring plan. Again, I'm the lead regulatory reporting engineer. I've been with ESC for about 8 years now. I started with implementations engineering, but now I've been into the regulatory reporting engineer role for probably about 6-7 years prior to that. So if there's any questions or anything beyond this in which we can help, please feel free to email me. I provided my email right there at jsanchez@escspectrum.com. Again, with any questions that even are outside the scope of this presentation, feel free to message me and we can go ahead and follow up with that the best way possible. And with that being said, we'll go ahead and begin. Okay, so a monitoring plan is basically going to encompass various aspects for compliance and detailed methods that needs to be implemented and submitted to the EPA effectively. Now, the monitoring plan does consist of quite a bit of different factors. Here I've laid out just a simple flow chart in which a monitoring plan can be implemented. Now, again, several key components, and some of the ones that we'll be discussing can range anywhere from components change, if you're changing out an analyzer, maybe you're just updating your span, which does typically we recommend that you do an annual span evaluation, depending on how you run your units. If fuel flow meters are they switched out, etc. So there's so many different variances that can be applied to this, and that are entailed within the monitoring plan. Again, a basic concept. Okay, let's see. Now, some of the other things that that monitoring plans can include is not only just the characteristics of the plan itself, but it's also can entail reporting frequency. Are there the types of the details to the stacks, size, height, diameter, etc. All these are going to be unique characteristics and specific to the monitoring plan, and that again that will be reported to the EPA. So it's very, very important that we are specific with the details in which we are applying to these monitoring plans. Monitoring location. What part of program are you associated with? Are you Casper? Are you Part 75, etc.? MATs applied, LME. All these are going to affect your monitoring plan and the way it looks. So some of these characteristics may not even be in your monitoring plan, but this is just the typical range of what could be encompassed in your monitoring plan. Again, this just does not reflect everyone's monitoring plan, just an example of what could potentially be in your monitoring plan. Now, the thing about the monitoring plan is that when I'm going to be discussing this, I wanted to apply it with both respect to StackVision and Prism. Now, both of these, when you're updating a monitoring plan, are going to differ quite a bit, but also be very similar. And it's just in the steps in which are implemented. StackVision can be a very complex tool in which you're trying to update the monitoring plan. But one of the things that we take pride with StackVision is that it allows a user-friendly wizard to continue to apply a test, whether it be any type of QA testing or anything like that, and as well as with the monitoring plan. The monitoring plan, we can go ahead and pretty much update with respect to the software very, very easily. Now with Prism, it's a little different. It's still the same concept, but in this situation, the monitoring plan, any adjustments that are made have to be done in the ECMPS client tool. As y'all know, ECMPS 2.0 will be coming out as a web-based version and not a standalone client tool. So towards the end of the presentation, we will be discussing a little bit of what to expect with maybe ECMPS 2.0 coming up with what we've heard from the EPA. But for now, we're going to be discussing the differences and where to start to update your monitoring plan, StackVision versus Prism. Again, very similar in some in every aspect because it needs to be reported the same way to the EPA. But the method in which it's updated is different. So we're going to start with StackVision. Now, when you update your monitoring plan, whether it be an analyzer update, you're doing a annual qualification record for your peaker, whatever the case is, you're going to have to update your monitoring plan. Now, typically, again, we do update some of these records in the ECMPS client tool. From there, we export the monitoring plan, and then we can go ahead and import it into the StackVision server. Here is where it becomes a two-step process. In order for your monitoring plan to reflect the changes that you've made, you have to import them into StackVision. Now, Stack Studio is a separate entity in itself, but also linked to StackVision. StackVision is typically the tool that most customers are associated with, but Stack Studio is where most of the changes are made for configuration. When you open up, now some customers may not have access to the Stack Studio application, and that's okay because y'all can go ahead and just call into ESC support, which they should have admin rights, and we can update that monitoring plan for you. It's pretty easy. Again, here I give a quick little demonstration of StackVision and where we're looking at and where to identify the monitoring plan. But again, updating the monitoring plan from StackVision is different than it's going to be in Prism. Now, there's different now, say you're a customer that you don't know, you just came into the job and you're not sure where to find the monitoring plan. There's different places where you can find the monitoring plan and also which one is configured into the system. Here in StackVision, if you go to your reports in Part 75, you can actually identify the monitoring plan that is configured right now. Again, the reason I bring this up is because Stack Studio, when you override a monitoring plan, that it overrides the one that's already pre-existing. So it's a very good idea if you have the possibility to save the old monitoring plan in case there's changes that you were not expecting or did not mean to do, and you could revert back to the old monitoring plan. That's something that customers kind of get into it by sometimes. So just kind of a FYI. For now, I know that this can be very, very confusing sometimes, but I'm going to pause here for a few questions. Does anyone have any questions about where to locate their monitoring plan or how to update it in StackVision? Okay, and if there's any questions later on, please feel free to just throw them in the chat. So again, this is a place where you can identify your monitoring plan in StackVision. Now, say you're still not sure yet, and you still want to identify your monitoring plan. Again, this is the way it will look in StackVision. It's going to, and one of the great things about StackVision is that you're going to be able to look at your monitoring plan very, very simple. Another way you can identify it is online. Through the EPA, they have the latest record. It does not look quite like this. I like this one because it's basically a report where you can just generate it as a PDF, and it will populate everything that as your facility is configured with respect to the monitoring plan. This one I do like. Again, you can also view it in ECMPS as well, to see the latest updated monitoring plan. With Prism, you cannot view, just FYI, the monitoring plan. If you're trying to look at the latest monitoring plan in Prism, you're going to have to refer to either the EPA website, or you're going to have to look at your ECMPS client tool with the last updated monitoring plan that was reported to the EPA. Now, if you don't know where to find your monitoring plan, make sure, and this is crucial, when you're logging into your client tool, please log in with your credentials so it is updated with the most up-to-date information. This will change with 2.0 since it will be web-based. It's going to be constantly updating. But in this event, if you have a standalone client tool, it may not automatically update. So when you enter your credentials, please make sure you update your client tool with the most up-to-date information. Once you've successfully logged into your ECMPS client tool, now you can make your way to the monitoring plan tab on the left-hand side. And here you'll be able to actually have a printout of your current monitoring plan. You can see how on the steps I have them listed 1 to 2, where you're going to enter your ORSIS code and view report. This will again give you your updated monitoring plan if you don't have access to StackVision. As I said before, you could always, and this is the way it looks on the EPA website. It does populate it in a different manner. It's not my favorite, but it's still there. It's still pretty easy to read. It really isn't that bad. I just prefer viewing it in the StackVision method, where it's just one single report. But again, to each their own. But there is more than one way to identify your monitoring plan. And the reason, again, I want to emphasize on this because you want to make sure that you understand what is in your current monitoring plan. So if you are making changes, you cannot revert back to them. You have to update the new monitoring plan. If you want to go back to the old change, you're going to have to update it again. So it's definitely a very tedious process if you're making constant changes or you're changing out a lot of units and analyzers. That's something you don't want to keep updating over and over and over. All right, so just really quick, let's just kind of discuss what's inside your monitoring plan. There's so much going on with your monitoring plans. Now, what makes a monitoring plan very unique is, again, there are different types of monitoring plans. Again, we understand that we have different customers that are full SEMs, Appendix D, Appendix E, LMEs. It could be MATS affiliated, opacity measurement. There's so many different factors in which can really characterize your monitoring plan. But some of the things, and I've listed here, are 2 different things that are going to allow your monitoring, that are going to be characteristic to your monitoring plan. Your facility details, how frequently you're reporting. Are you doing semi-annual? Are you doing quarterly for certain QA testing? Your monitoring location, again, is very unique as well, etc. There's a lot of different aspects to your monitoring plan that are going to contribute in how it looks. One thing that I do want to emphasize, and this is very confusing sometimes, when you're talking about a monitoring plan, and let's just say, for example, you need to update your monitoring plan. Sometimes your state or the EPA may request an electronic and hard copy of your new monitoring plan with the changes that you've updated. Your electronic and hard copy are not the same thing, obviously, but a lot of customers tend to get confused on what a hard copy means. Your hard copy is going to essentially be the copy of your monitoring plan, but it's not the same thing as when you go to an electronic copy. Electronic copy is not a printout of your monitoring plan. Definitely not. Your hard copy is going to be a monitoring plan, but your electronic copy is going to be the point in which, if you look at the EPA, there's a certain specific guidelines that you have to include in your electronic copy. I'm sorry, I'm mixing that up. In your hard copy, it includes different characteristics such as the stack height, MPCs, MECs, so many different characteristics that may not be included in your electronic copy of your monitoring plan. Your hard copy is a different entity in its own. I just want to emphasize, when they're asking you for an electronic copy, or I'm sorry, the hard copy, it's not a printout of your monitoring plan. Again, those guidelines are posted on the EPA and how you have to, and what they were requiring. Please feel free to look at that, or reach out to us and we can help you and guide you to what's entailed in that hard copy. So I want to make sure that is clear. Are there any questions about electronic copies and hard copies? I'll give 1 second in case anyone has any questions about that. Again, that's more of a new thing. Well, it's always been something that the EPA is required, but I do feel as if something that has come up and is starting to be um, looked at more frequently. So please be aware, if you haven't updated any of these copies, make sure that they're up to date. Okay, just like I specified before, the two main components is not the same thing as printing out your monitoring plan. So why do we have hard copies? Again, the hard copy, as I said before, this one's going to be a different type of requirement that the EPA is asking for. It includes protocols as well. Again, as I specified, the calculations for your MPCs, MACs, flow diagrams, schematics of your flue gas, and the flue gas can entail component IDs, system IDs, up-to-date information in whichever that's looking like and whatever's been updated, and or even just the dimensions, locations of your stack. So remember, keep in mind that hard copies will be different. That will differ based on methodology. If you may not even have much to add to your hard copy if you are an LME, if you think about it. So just keep in mind that these are two different things than if the EPA or your state asks you for these. Okay. Again, there's different ways that you can update your client tool. We're going to kind of start looking at more specifics and how to use these tools and how they're applied with respect to Prism and StackVision. You can use your ECMPS client tool to make any of these edits. More than likely, if you're a Prism customer, this will be a majority of where you make your updates. You can use the DAS to make these edits and import as well, obviously. The one thing, there is another option, modify the monitoring plan outside the client tool and DAS. I'm assuming this is an older method of using like an Excel sheet or something. I do not recommend this because one of the reasons we like using these ECMPS client tools and DAS or using the DAS to make these edits is because there is a check and it allows us to confirm that the changes are appropriate with respect to what the EPA guidelines are specifying. When you're using something outside of those tools, you're essentially relying on yourself, and sometimes human error can be obviously this, especially with what we're doing, human error can be very prevalent. So highly recommend to kind of keep away from that unless you just feel that confident. I know I don't, but I'd rather use a ECMPS or a DAS tool to kind of help me make those changes and edits for updating the monitoring plan. So, and that's what we're here for. If there's anything that you do need assistance with, please feel free to reach out to ESC support. Again, with the reporting services, we actually take care of these services for y'all, but these can be very cumbersome. So let's take a look at how this is done. Again, I will be going over StackVision and Prism. Before I go into that, here are just some examples of what typical monitoring plan updates are received from our customers. Span changes are typically, again, those need to be or recommended to be reviewed annually. If there's no span change, you just leave them as such. This is not required, but it is still recommended. That way you're not operating or outside your span range, because that can happen, obviously, especially if you are a unit that operates consistently. Changes in your methods. What if you're changing from an Appendix D to LME or vice versa? We started to see LMEs actually turn to Appendix D units because of the changes of regulations, cap trading, etc. All these are changing, are wishing customers change methodologies with how they operate. So that can be very cumbersome as well. Assigning, again, we have been seeing new component IDs. We typically see this quite a bit. DAS vendor changes, not too often, but we do see them here and there. So those are obviously heavily involved because we have to update everything and implement historical information as well. So that one's pretty big. Fuel flow meter replacements are obviously annual. If you're running consistently with 4 QA quarters, remember there is no grace period for those. And then updating your annual qualification records. If you're a peaker unit, more than likely you're going to have to update your qualification. And that does require a monitoring plan update. So these are just common things that we see in the reporting group and updating the monitoring plan. With that being said, are there any questions of maybe something that I may have missed or other examples that y'all may have seen as far that require monitoring plan changes or updates? Okay, fair enough. Again, if there's any other questions that do come up towards the end of the meeting, feel free to just go ahead and, like I said, put them in the chat or email them to me personally, whatever y'all would like. Analyzer changes. Yeah, Bert. So is there a specific question on analyzer changes that you have? Those are very common, and those could be very, very unique as well. I mean, so with analyzer changes, I've seen 2 different aspects to those. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, absolutely. So and analyzer changes can be very tricky because some customers do them differently. Some customers they have analyzers ready to just swap out. Sometimes they don't. They do them in turnarounds. That can be very, very. That is one understanding that we need to make sure that. Okay, yeah, for the analyzers themselves. Yeah, no, definitely. And obviously when you're switching or upgrading analyzers, there's so many things that you're going to need to do. And in fact, we're going to go over that here in a second. Exactly. Yep. Cert event. It's going to require the whole enchilada. I don't know if y'all heard that term. It's going to require quite a bit though. So we're going to dive into that there, Bert, here in a second, and it's going to give you a pretty good review of or understanding of what may need to be updated. But again, with anything that I may not go over, we can set aside a different time and we can go over that stuff. Feel free to shoot me an email and we can peruse through that. So with that being said, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the monitoring plan updates and how they're being done. Now, if you look at it on the overall in a big picture, StackVision and Prism, essentially almost the same thing. It's just the steps in which it's going to come out to the same result. It's just in how it's implemented. One is just a preference, really. It's like saying, would you prefer an iPhone or an Android? They're both going to do the same thing. It's just in different ways, right? That's all we're doing. So let's start. So in StackVision, you're going to start with the ECMPS client tool with some respect. I mean, a lot of the StackVision, the StackVision tool, it allows you to actually make some updates in there as well. So you can export them and evaluate. For example, Bert, you're mentioning a cert event. You can do that cert event in StackVision. Export that to, and say there's a whole bunch of them. Say you're replacing 3 analyzers and you do 3 cert events. You can export that QA XML, evaluate it in ECMPS, and it's going to allow it to let you know like you have an incorrect. There's an inconsistency with the time you recalibrate the analyzer versus installation. You know what I mean? So it's gonna give you a certain feedback and allow you to, instead of just guessing. Now you can do that with the ECMPS client tool. The only difference is that when you're trying to import it and with respect to your emissions data, that is where it starts to become, because you're going to still have to export the same way. So you're still taking extra steps, and hopefully, yep, oh yeah, definitely. It's definitely all about the dates. Absolutely. And in fact, that's one of the examples I'm going to show you where that's a really common error that I often see with some of my customers is the dates. And I think that's one of something that we're trying to, it's such a simple thing to do, but it's really important because if the date's off, you're going to get an error. And obviously we don't like those. So again, approaching StackVision and Prism is very, very similar, but still different. You're still going to have to export a monitoring plan. and import them into the tool, whether it be StackStudio or Prism. Now, there's one extra step with StackVision because you have to save to server. In Prism, you don't have to do that. That's one of the cool things about it, is that it's just automatically updated to it. But there's a lot more feedback on the StackVision side when you're updating that monitoring plan as well. So if being on this side of it and working with both applications, I've seen the differences and I see the pros and cons. Absolutely. It's just, again, preference of the user. So if you're having any issues with that, though, please feel free to reach out to us, because that's what we're here for. All right, so monitoring plan. So again, this is just one example. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be updating, I believe, an analyzer. My apologies, because it's been a long time since I looked at this presentation. But in this one, we're going to start with StackVision. Now, again, I really want to emphasize, please log into your client tool and make sure it is updated, because if it is not, if you're logging in and you work offline, and I'm sure everyone's seen that, you have the option to enter your credentials or work offline. If you're working offline, your tool will not be updated. So if you've already submitted in the, let's just say, for example, the third quarter of 2024, and you need to make a monitoring plan update and you're making it for 4Q 2024, and you have not updated your client tool, you will not see the reflective changes that you submitted to the EPA, and you will probably be receiving errors and going through quite a bit. So just feel free to make sure that it's always updated, no matter any time you log in. I just say that's the safest bet, but to each your own, right? So now, once you've logged in and successfully updated your tool, you're going to go drive down to the monitoring plan the monitoring plan data tab on the left-hand side, and here, this is where you're going to start your process. Now, on the methods the methods tab, you can identify that this is their methodology. We have CO2 that is being for this particular customer is being applied for using CO2 with the method code of Appendix D, heat input Appendix D, and this is very common, very, very common. We see data substitution where it's appropriate on the Appendix D for heat input and CO2, SO2. Again, these are the interactions and these characteristics and how they are linked together. And you can see, if you look at that flow chart that I had previously, how it cascades down. Let's go to the next slide. Now, again, let me go back really quick. So we see components. We have our methodology. Now we have our components. This, to me, is one of the biggest parts that we see inconsistencies. And it's very important. And the reason I emphasize on this is for auditing purposes, okay? Or if, say, there's change in faculty, right? The information that you provide is only as good as that is given. So now technically the EPA will need a serial number, but it may not require a manufacturer or model. And you could probably put whatever. That's not good though, right? Because if there's a change in faculty, and let's just say, for example, you hire ESC to help you facilitate and update their monitoring plan, I'm going to go based on a record where I don't know what exactly was where, right? So if and now granted, there is a character limit on some of these, I believe, for the model version, but the best thing you can do is just provide the most up-to-date information as possible, especially with the manufacturer, because if you look at these, there's so many component IDs associated, and we have to make sure that we identify the appropriate ones. So again, please at least provide the information, or at the best of the ability, so we can enter them and it's up to date, and so that we know that we're changing and changing out the monitoring plan and updating it as appropriate as possible with the correct information. Trying to think if there's anything else on this one. That was my biggest thing, was just to make sure that we have the information for manufacturers and model version. That really does help a lot, especially the model version and serial numbers. Before I continue, are there any questions so far about ECMPS and updating this? Okay, now in this event, we're going to update a fuel flow meter. In this event, I thought I had the example. My apologies, Bert. I thought I had the example of updating an analyzer, but this is a fuel flow meter. But again, you're still going to see a lot of similarities, right? We see that now in this event, we're going to update the fuel flow meter. When you go into systems, you're going to update it under systems component. But now, please keep in mind, again, there are tiers to this. There's a pattern. As we go down the tabs, we are starting to see that we have two different type of monitoring IDs. We have a gas and a NOx. If I go back, we see our NOx. And I think in this one, I wasn't able to capture. Yeah, so if you go to system right here, that you would be able to see it. But here we are identifying the NOx gas itself. I'm sorry, the gas system itself, the fuel flow meter, right? We're not doing a pollutant, we're doing a gas system, a fuel flow meter. And again, I went ahead and ended the date, and this is really, really crucial, updating the date appropriately. I've ended the date on 3/21/2004 at hour 7, and I'm beginning at 3/21/2024 hour 8. Okay. Once you made your changes, I highly recommend to evaluate on number 5 step here. It says no errors, but that's after I evaluated, but it'll say evaluation or evaluating it. Once you evaluate, it's either going to give you a critical or no errors. Hopefully no errors. Okay, once you make the changes and you feel comfortable with them and they came back no errors, this is where you're going to enter in and you're going to export your monitoring plan. You're going to enter your ORSYS code, select monitoring plan, and you can do this other ones too, right? Maybe you're doing other changes for your QAs and you need to just export a QA. Now, if you're a Prism customer, you will absolutely have to export your QA insert event. Typically, again, with StackVision, you can do that in the tool itself. But with Prism, you can't do that. And if you wanted to, you could even export emissions data for whatever time span that you're looking for, and then save it to the designated file and export. So real quickly, again, not all customers are going to have availability to Stack Studio. If you have any problems with that, please contact us. Now, updating your monitoring plan, you're going to, once you've logged into StackVision, you'll open up the Stack Studio application, and you're just going to update the monitoring plan. Now, again, it's very important, in my opinion, that you save the previous monitoring plan in case there were some changes that you were not ready for, or that were mistakenly that was obviously a mistake and did not mean to update. So I highly recommend, and you can export the old file. Once you've exported that file and you have it as a backup and put into a designated folder where you know it's a backup, then you can go ahead and import the monitoring plan from which you've saved from the ECMPS client tool, and you can go ahead and go to File and Save. And it's very important. Now, this can look different depending on the customer. Sometimes this can be grayed out. If it's grayed out, it's because either someone has it checked out or you don't have the credentials to save to server. One of those have happened, but it should look like this. If none of those have occurred, you should go to File, Save, and Save to Server. And keep in mind that when you save to server, there is going to be a disconnect from this application to the StackVision application. You will see an intermittent of no polling. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not actually receiving data. The 8864 will be pulling in data. So that should not be a concern. What it's going to happen, though, is updating the new monitoring plan, so there's going to be a blip. Usually it takes about 2-3 minutes at max, if anything. You can always retrieve data. The 8864 has more than enough capacity to update that, so there shouldn't be a problem. If there is, please contact us, and we can definitely help you out with that. Now with Prism, as I specified before, with Prism, you're still gonna have the same type of capability, but you're going to be doing most of your changes in the ECMPS client tool. So stepping away from StackVision, let's just say, for example, you are doing an analyzer changeout, like you were saying, Bert, you are going to have cert events. You're going to have, let's just say you're doing the whole shebang. You're going to have cert events. You're going to have 7-day cows. You're going to have RADAs, linearity, you name it. All of that information will have to be entered into the ECMPS client tool. All of that information. The great thing about that is that you can evaluate, as I specified before, and I'll just go back to that. You can evaluate on the very top right-hand corner where it says no errors. It will say evaluate. So as you're progressing through your updated QA tests that are required for an analyzer changeout, it will respond with the errors that you could potentially receive before. So before importing that monitoring plan update or change to the Prism client tool, you can always just evaluate here and make sure that it receives no errors. Again, some of these messages can be really weird. So if you're having trouble with those, please feel free to contact us and we can probably assist you with that. Okay, now, again, so here, and this is just a step-by-step process of when you're going to updating your Prism client tool. You're going to go to the settings in the very below, Part 75, and monitoring plan. Now, again, this is after assuming that you've entered in all the information that you've needed, and it's now going to be updated to the monitoring plan. And obviously, you're going to have to run your sequences and run over to make sure that the monitoring plan update is reflecting the appropriate changes. So this one with Prism, it's a little more cumbersome in the fact that you're doing everything in the ECMPS client tool, but it's a lot better because you're just importing one thing. So it's not, again, pros and cons to both of these, but now once you've designated that you need to update the monitoring plan, you'll select your unit and they'll add a new monitoring plan. Now, so when you're updating your monitoring plan in Prism, most of this should not have changed unless you're now your ozone season. Now, that will be different. You will have to select report ozone or ozone season only if you've changed that. But most times, most customers usually, they already know they're ozone or not, so it's not too much of a problem. Any comments that if desired, if you want to fill in, make sure that you can locate your file and import, and it should populate on the bottom. And you can see here, the last date was 2/28/2023. Once you've updated it, it'll update to the new, you should see the reflective date whenever you update your monitoring plan. Again, common problems. Bert, as you were saying before, dates are very, very important. And especially with customers that are doing these changes. If we don't have the appropriate dates, StackVision or Prism will come back, or basically ECMPS client tool will actually come back with errors. If please keep record of these, and specifically, especially with hours, the more information that we have, the better, because this allows us to easily change out, because if we're changing out these components or analyzers or anything that we're changing out and updating the monitoring plan, the more detail we have, it's going to allow us to update the monitoring plan way easier. The biggest hang-up is missing data, missing information. That's honestly what really holds us up. So I really wanted to stress on this in this situation. But in fact, you can see I made it a super obvious error. I just changed the begin hour to an hour before the ending date. Of course, the ECMPS is going to catch that. And that's just a very, very simple example. But if it was that easy, well, I guess everyone could take care of it. But they're usually not that easy. So there's usually a lot of information that is being passed over and that needs to be entered, and it's usually not entered in the correct way. So if you have that information, we're going to be able to provide guidance and how to enter in that information if there's any questions for our customers. So I kind of already just again gone over a basis of what to how to update your monitoring plan with respect to StackVision and Prism. I know that was very brief, may have been really simple, but again, I know it doesn't happen all the time. It can happen annually, it could happen quarterly or semi-annually. The point is that there's a lot of details that are always forgotten, and we tend to update these monitoring plans with lack of information. The more information that we have, the more available and readily available that we can provide any guidance and how to update that monitoring plan. But that would be my suggestion for anyone going through this. Kind of some updates on what to expect with 2.0. Still the same thing. There's not too much to update other than what we've already announced or what the EPA has already announced. We're still, again, report instructions, trying to match the schema in every way possible. They're trying to allow it so it's functionable, but they're still not there yet. Max functionality, they're still under development as far as I know. I haven't seen anything from them. I believe they do have import data for QA cert events and things like that, but I don't think they have a schema to compare for the MATS PDF module, to my understanding. That's something I was looking up and I didn't see anything updated, but I think that's where they're still at the same spot. What else? And then just the beta testing. EPA is going to be updating the beta environment. I don't think they've updated it since it's been a while, but it's still the same. So if you haven't really seen anything new, that's probably pretty spot on. Again, I provided a link on as far as if you have not been in the beta, you can create a beta environment. You will need to create a CDX account, which is different. Once you've done that, you can go ahead and create your beta account. I've provided the instructions there. Again, they're still being updated as appropriately. Oh, this is just a table, just what to expect. Again, this says schema completed. MATS is not. You notice here how there's no MATS as far as that's being completed. Let's see. They do have reporting diagrams as far as flow charts on the way they're implemented. It's pretty much very similar to the way ECMPS 1.0 has been operating, with a few updated diagrams. And I've also provided some resources that you can go to the EPA and keep updated with 2.0. That being said, are there any questions about updating the monitoring plan or something that y'all feel that I may have missed or did not cover? Like I said, if y'all think of anything, please feel free to reach out to reporting group. Obviously, monitoring plans updates is a pretty simple concept, but honestly, there's so many. I feel like there's a lot more questions when you're actually updating your monitoring plan. So when you're updating your monitoring plan, I'm pretty confident saying y'all might have some questions. Please reach out to us. That's what we're here for. And we want to make sure that we make it for y'all as easy as possible, and definitely educating and helping each other to kind of get to the same concept of just updating the monitoring plan successfully with respect to the EPA guidelines. So with that being said, please feel free to reach out. I'll go ahead, and if there are no questions, I can hand it back to Taylor.
Awesome. Thank you, JessLee, for the great presentation. If we have no more questions, give a couple more seconds, but if we have no more questions, we do appreciate everyone taking time out of their day to join us. So have a great rest of your day. If you have any questions specific to your facility, we can place our support and JessLee's email into the chat, and you can email them with your questions. Awesome. Well, thank y'all, everyone. Y'all have a great rest of your day.